Before we get to the legal update, let me just update folks. There have been two issues that I've been dealing with as a resident with a rental property. One is our property, turns out when we put it up for sale, 40 years ago, when I was in third grade, the prior owner had converted it from a two-family to a single-family. And I'd updated people at our two meetings ago. So we are working with the building department to legalize that work that was done by the previous owner, just as most residents have to do. The other issue is the STAR tax exemption, which that same property, when we moved in 2000, through an error in the city assessor's office, that exemption stayed on the books. And so this came about when New York State was looking at revamping the STAR program, and there were a number of homes that had discrepancies. Ours was one. Our position is what we owe is what we owe. So we made full restitution to the county in terms of the amount owed and penalties. And what's come about is now Ray Tartaglione from Purchase has made a complaint against the mayor, the city manager, corporation counsel, the city's assessor, conflicts of interest with the Board of Ethics, who has a former judge, former mayor, former council person. And so, don't take my word for it. I've called on the deputy mayor to refer this matter back to the Board of Ethics. And generally, the Board of Ethics is comprised of, traditionally, people that sit on the council because they know city government and they know the operation. So I've called on that just to make sure there were no ethical issues with respect to those two matters that I just discussed. So with that, I will turn over to the deputy mayor.
I want to thank everybody for taking the time this week to chat with me and so on. And here tonight, first off, I'd love to hear your views, if you have any on this matter. I know you all do, but if publicly want to discuss them. So, anybody want to discuss this issue? Or Laura, you're no longer waving a pencil, I guess. Okay. You're going to bring it back.
I'm going to refer to my notes because I've actually looked at the city code and the city charter pretty extensively on this. And I made some notes. Let's see. In any event, I think that the city code of ethics exists for the purposes of resolving complaints like the one raised by Mr. Tartaglione, where he's suggesting that there's some improper conduct by members of the city officials or city staff. And I think that's what the Code of Ethics is there for. It sits in place in case issues like this arise. It establishes an ethics board that can hear complaints like this, and these are my views of what the jurisdiction of the Board of Ethics is. And so I believe pretty firmly that this should be referred back. I know it was referred once, but they felt that it had not been referred properly. And so I guess this needs to be done in writing by a city official, and I suppose that would require the deputy mayor to, or any one of us, to make an official complaint in writing to the Board of Ethics. At that point, it will be up to the Board of Ethics to determine whether or not they have jurisdiction. But it's my view that that's the proper procedure in this case. And it takes it then outside the hands of the City Council, which I think is the proper place for it to be. The City Council is really primarily a legislative body, and there are a lot of issues before the city right now. And I think that this is an issue that should be looked at outside the scope of the City Council. The people who are appointed to the Board of Ethics, it's a standing committee, so those people were appointed before any complaints arose. The people who are appointed to the Board of Ethics are people who hold the public's trust. They're former elected officials in the city of Rye, and I think as such, they are in a position to determine whether or not they have a conflict of interest in reviewing this complaint. I would say that some of the issues that have been raised about the composition of the Board of Ethics confuse whether or not the Board of Ethics has, the members of the Board of Ethics may have an actual conflict of interest in hearing this complaint, or whether or not they have an apparent conflict of interest in reviewing this complaint. Both of those issues should be raised before the Board of Ethics. My understanding is the last time the Board of Ethics gathered, the Corporation Counsel and the City Manager are technically appointed to be on that Board of Ethics, and both of them said that they had a conflict and therefore withdrew themselves from the Board of Ethics for the purpose of hearing this. The remaining members are, again, former elected officials of the City of Rye. I would recommend that, I would say that just because those members of the Board of Ethics have said that they did not have a conflict of interest in hearing the initial complaint, does not mean that they would necessarily feel the same way in reviewing this complaint. I think the last complaint, they were specifically concerned about their jurisdiction in reviewing the complaint. I think in this complaint, if you feel that if anyone member of the public feels that that the remaining members of the Board of Ethics have a conflict of interest, whether it's actual or apparent, that those members of the Board of Ethics are the proper people to review whether or not they have a conflict of interest. And I want to make it clear that there's a difference between an actual conflict of interest and an apparent conflict of interest. I think that an actual conflict of interest means that you have an actual interest in the outcome of the dispute, meaning the complaint is against you, you obviously cannot be the person to review it. An apparent conflict of interest, on the other hand, means that there are, by way of your relationships with members of your relationships with the officials that you're investigating, that the public will not have confidence in the outcome of the decision. I think that it is the apparent conflict of interest that has been raised that I think should be raised again before the remaining members of the Board of Ethics. An apparent conflict of interest is a very problematic area, because the point of referring this complaint at this point to the Board of Ethics is so that the public will have confidence that when a complaint is raised, a proper authority can review it. So I think that if anyone feels that the current members of the Board of Ethics have not necessarily an actual conflict of interest, but an apparent conflict of interest, such that they cannot review this complaint fairly, or if they can review it fairly, the public still would not have confidence in their decision, I think that particular issue should be raised with the Board of Ethics. But again, at this point, I think that is outside the scope of what this City Council can do with respect to referring this matter to the Board of Ethics.
Thanks. That was well-reasoned.
You're going to work out really well, Joe.
Yeah. You know anything about the law, do you?
Can I follow?
Yes, sure.
That was great.
Yeah.
Thank you. Really, really helpful. I wanted to talk about this also, and now you've given me some really good terminology. Actual conflict of interest, apparent conflict of interest. So, as it was stated, the existing ethics board consists of the mayor, the corporation council, the city manager, and then 3 former elected officials.
The mayor's not a member of the Board of Ethics.
Just the...
It's a 5-member board.
5-member.
Yeah.
Excuse me.
No, okay. That's
So
fine.
actual conflict of interest brings it down to a 3-member board. If 2 people felt that there was an apparent conflict of interest, that would bring it down to a 1-person ethics board. And my perception is that our board as such then is too small. Simply, given the fact that the 3 former elected officials, I would have to say, I would venture that any one of us, if we are no longer a member of the city council, will still have a continued interest in the spectator sport that we call local politics. And, around here, though, the spectator sport's becoming a bit of a blood sport, but in any case, I think that to the public, I do understand then, again, that difference between apparent and actual. And I would think for the public, that sense of trust that you would want in your elected officials, former or present, would be at risk. So my thought for tonight was I would like to propose between now and our February 9th meeting that we circulate some names of people within the community that are longstanding, have we would consider to be exemplary citizens, and that we discuss, I will have a draft resolution for our February 9th meeting. We could have it as a discussion issue, and then look at it for our February 25th meeting. And I agree with your idea about referring it back to the Ethics Board, this issue, but I would hope maybe that we could sort of reconstitute the Ethics Board, increase the size before that goes back, so it doesn't, in effect, end up being a decision really made by one.
Yes.
Yeah, Deputy Mayor. First of all, I agree with what Laura said. And actually, Kristen, can you tell me who's the appropriate person to actually report on what the Ethics Board found, or what their statement?
Well, their minutes have been made public, I believe. They're on the website.
Okay.
Yeah.
And essentially, I can
So the public
summarize.
if you could summarize,
Sure.
I think this would be helpful for everyone.
They found essentially that they did not have jurisdiction because the code does require the referral to come from a city employee or city official, and there's a reason for that. We don't want anyone to be able to refer any question to the Board of Ethics. So it's a technicality, but I think it's an important one. So they found that they did not have jurisdiction for that reason. They also did make a determination that the three remaining members did not feel that they had a conflict of interest. So those were really the two decision points, if you will, that came out of that meeting.
Great. So to that point, I just have a couple of series of questions, please. So to that point, I do believe that the City of Rye has a long-established history of putting policies and procedures in place with our charter that are effective and that really support the public. So I would recommend that we stick very close to the charter and let it play out, which is to take this issue and make sure it's a clearly defined question, which to me personally, also the question that was sent was very unclear and very vague, is go back to the Ethics Board because that is our charter. I also, when you talk about people having conflicts or not, I mean, no matter who we put in on that board in Rye, if we go back to one of our mayors, we're going to have a former mayor that we put on the board that's announcing he's running for a public office. So no matter what we're doing, we're going to end up with somebody with an apparent conflict. And if those individuals, a respected judge, a respected former mayor, a respected former city council member, per our charter, it is up to them to decide if they have an ethical conflict. So I put my confidence in them and recommend that we go back to them, follow the paces of our charter and what has been allowed by the public. If afterwards, Catherine, we feel that this process is not running its course from this second engagement, we're not satisfied, then we potentially have other, courses of action.
Maybe I wasn't clear. I was actually thinking to expand it and not have former elected officials, but have clergy members, other people within the community that have not held an office where they ran on either the Democratic or Republican ticket. I mean, nobody except those that have been appointed can say that. And I can see that given a different situation, if something, if I were, something was referred to the Ethics Board that had, to do with me, I could see where, Beth Griffin Matthews would be in a situation where she would have to recuse herself. It makes sense. As I stated, I think former council members, they may step off the dais, but they still sort of pay attention to what's going on in local politics. They might get involved on a campaign. They may, support a candidate. So I could see going forward that it could be problematic, given a totally different, as I say, looking at something hypothetical down the line. I think that we should be looking at expanding it beyond former city council members.
I think that that's definitely an appropriate argument for afterwards, but I also think right now, this is an issue that is taking up the city's business. And the city needs to spend their time looking at these financial matters. We need to put this to bed and try and get satisfaction. I think that's what the public wants. I think that that's what we need to do as a council, and we need to put it behind us. I think that that's fair to look at afterwards, Catherine, but I think we have a system in place now that we need to look at. I mean, there also has been a call for outside counsel and independent review. I think that right now, again, we have a charter that is in place. We have an ethics committee. We have a protocol. We need to follow that course. And then at the end of the day, there's not satisfaction, then we can look at other courses of action.
I just don't think that course has worked out that well so far, so I would reconsider that.
Joe?
Well, I agree with parts of everything that has been said. And I think we can all agree that this has been a major distraction. And it will continue to be a distraction unless and until, some way, somehow, the open questions and open issues that have been raised are addressed and disposed of in a credible way that people have faith in. So here's just my open thought process, and you know, I think it's important that the council comes to some sort of consensus. And I have my own views, and I'll share them, but I'm also willing to, you know, work with everyone. I think that another thing that everyone seems to agree on here, including the mayor, is that somehow this needs to be looked at, which I think is the good news. So my concern with the chronology of how things have happened so far is that the ethics board kind of, you know, they punted already. Okay, maybe they outsmarted themselves by hanging their hat on these technicalities, but the reality is that they already determined that they would not hear it. And I thought it was for two reasons, Kristen. I haven't seen this written thing that was done that is apparently on the website, but I was led to believe in things that I've read that they punted because they did not believe that Scott's email to them constituted a written referral of a city official or officer, and that because of the charter's reference to advisory opinions, they determined that they could only make prospective opinions, and this was with regard to something that has already happened. So to now kind of push it back at them when it's coming from the mayor and the deputy mayor almost seems like they're being pressured to go back on what they've already done, which starts to chip away at the credibility that we really need. And Laura, I think you correctly referenced the distinction between actual or appearance of conflict. I think clearly there's an appearance of conflict. And I think that we're probably not doing anyone any good. We're not doing the mayor any good, or ourselves or the community any good, if we put ourselves on a track to come up with something that is going to be questioned from the get-go. I think another issue I have with what has already happened, because unfortunately we're not starting with a clean slate, is that the ethics board went into executive session and they took with them a member of Kristen's law firm. And Kristen, unfortunately, you've been caught up in this. I think that was probably not the wisest thing to do. So the process has already been affected by that. And I would reiterate what I've heard Suzanne and other people say. I have nothing but respect for Mayor Dunn, Judge Alfano, and Beth Matthews, Councilwoman Matthews. I mean, I think they're terrific. And I have no doubt that they feel that they can continue to be fair and impartial. But in the eyes of the public, especially based on all the things that have also happened in addition to the apparent conflict, it kind of creates this critical mass. And I don't know, for those reasons, whether it would be the best thing to send it back to them. I mean, quite frankly, I don't know what we are sending to them, because in order for them to make a determination on ethics, there first needs to be a finding as to what happened. And quite frankly, that's what I want the most. I want to just know what the facts are. I don't know what the facts are based on what has been trickled out or shared selectively and what I've read on the internet and emails that go back and forth. I mean, I think what we really need, again, whether it's the ethics board that ends up taking it despite all my reservations about them taking it, or whether it's an independent person or attorney that we assign or retain to do it, I just need someone, from my point of view, to find out what the facts are. I don't need people to opine to me whether they think what happened was an ethics violation. I don't think we really need that. I think we can all make our own judgment and determination about what happened once we find out what did happen. And at this point, I don't think any of us can say that we do know that, and I think the only way we're going to get that information is if we have an independent person kind of marshal those facts, which will probably entail going out and speaking to various participants in this fact pattern. So, so even if it did go back to the ethics board, again, despite my reservations about it, I don't know if they have the capacity or the wherewithal to even undertake that type of mini investigation, or just fact finding, without, certainly not without the assistance of some sort of professional help in the form of maybe an attorney. And quite frankly, I don't think that even if the ethics board does get it back, they are going to need someone other than Kristen's law firm to assist them. So. So those are my thoughts. I mean, my preference would be that we get someone to just do a quick fact-finding and let us and everyone know what happened. We don't need someone to make moral or ethical judgments. We just need to know what happened. We can all make our own judgment. But again, the reason why it has been a distraction is because the issues haven't been addressed and the questions haven't been answered. The reason why it will continue to be a distraction is if we don't do that, and that's why I think everyone is best served if we just figure out what happened, address whatever issues have been raised, and then just move on.
Good.
Yeah, thank you. I agree also, like Joe, with the things that were said, but not wholeheartedly. Not a bit of everything. I'm sorry, just to paraphrase. I think that first of all, I'm glad that we have confidence in the people on the ethics committee because we voted for them as well as we chose Scott and Kristen for and we got to interview them and know them and we've worked with them. So I don't think there's an issue as to what we think that they are immoral or bad people or would distort the course of justice here. I agree with Catherine. I think we should expand it. I'm not really sure what you meant by exemplary. I mean, when you define it later on as clergy, okay, that's one way. And then, further you said no connection to city politics. But again, it's a small town, so even that, who knows if we're going to get somebody. And to Susanna's point, I don't know if we have the time because we want to get this stuff and get it behind it. To Joe's point, I think we should be very clear what we want the ethics board to look at and ask them if they have any point, if they want to, I think it's up to them to decide whether they recuse themselves from judging on this and call in an outside party. I don't think that we should be making that judgment for them. We chose them because they are upstanding citizens and they are people that have moral fiber. And I think that we should let it go at that. If they want to hire an outside counsel to help them, that's fine. But I don't think we should be picking that or telling them they have to recuse themselves because of an apparent conflict of interest. So I think that I know I myself, if I had to judge on something, I would look at the facts and give an honest opinion. I You know, I don't think things like that
Ask a question.
would get in the way of friendship and past benefits. So that's me, that's the way I look at the world. I think that we should be clear as to what we want the Board of Ethics to look at. I realize they punted it back. Again, it was a matter of procedure. I think we should be clear on what we want them to look at, how we want, and get back to us within a certain time frame.
Doug, you have a question?
Yeah, as, you know, since I became mayor in January 2010, can somebody on the council articulate to me what the allegation or unethical allegation is made against me, the city manager, the corporation council, the tax assessor? What is the allegation that's being brought forth? No, I ask the council.
Well, I mean, I only pick up bits and pieces, Doug. I don't really know. I mean, from what I can recall being discussed over the past few months, and again, I don't know what the particulars are of the issue, but the issues that I have heard raised are an illegal third floor, improvement work that was done without permits, use of the home as a one-family when it was a two-family. I mean, it's kind of comes a new one every day. I mean, the one that we've all been getting emails about now is the oil-gas conversion thing. On the star tax issue, I've heard, you know, that it was determined back in April that the two exemptions were being received, but no decision was made at that time to either offer paying back or request paying back. So, I mean, I think because of the open questions and the lack of information, that's exactly why we need someone to kind of go out and figure out if there's any substance to any of this, and just, if there's not, tell us that there's not, and the reasons why, and if there is, tell us that there is, so we can address it and just move on, because I don't think any of us really want
As
to...
a person that stands accused, you'll get answers if you can articulate what the issue is. Now, you said something about gas to oil. I mean, those are all allegations. What is the behavior that was done unethically that you're asking the Board of Ethics or asking me to respond to?
I'm not saying it at all. I'm just kind of repeating what I've heard. You asked me what the allegations are. That's what I've heard. I don't have any allegations.
Those are, you're just making statements. What is the behavior in terms of when I became mayor, right, until now? What are you alleging that took place?
Well, Doug, let's
within
not
that
take a
time?
step backwards. You actually yourself started the meeting by saying you wanted to be referred to the Ethics Committee.
Right.
So I'm not,
Right.
you know, let's not step backwards here.
Um,
You know, we're trying to get transparency so we can dispose of the issues and move on. You know?
Madam Brett, do you have
Yes,
a...
I have something to add here. It is my summary of the issue is that when these issues, the ones that Joe came to light, when these issues came to light, were they treated differently by the city manager, by the corporation council, by anybody on the city staff, because these issues arose with regard to the mayor's property? To me, that's the ethical issue. And the question, and so they're looking for misconduct by the mayor or by anybody in the city, on the city staff, to see if these issues were treated differently because of your position as an official within the city. To me, that is the question that we're asking the Ethics Committee to look at.
I have a question. Yes.
Oh, Debbie. And just to that exact point, we had to clarify the question, and I think that was the problem of when it was referred to the Ethics Committee, it was very unclear. It sounded to me like a fishing exhibition, and in all fairness to the Ethics Committee, we have to ask them the right question and the right way, and that's why you have to execute the process per the law. I also object to spending any taxpayer money for outside counsel on this legal issue, and we have worked so hard to really reduce our legal expenses. We had the care report, and we've had report upon report to try to reduce our litigation expenses, and we have a process in place right now with our charter. So thank you, Laura, for defining that.
Let me just one thing on the council. I have to say that the city code provides that the ethics board consult with council on the scope and the law, and our corporation council has an actual conflict of interest on this. And so does her firm. It's imputed to her firm. So we cannot, they need counsel, and they cannot use our corporation counsel or Harris Beach? To me, that's a very straightforward legal question. And although we may not want to spend city resources on this, I think in this situation, we have no choice.
I'm sorry, I misstated that incorrectly. I said for an outside investigation. I should have stated that clearly. Clarified to Joe's thinking, that I think, yes, it's defined very clearly by the charter, and also we shouldn't give any pressure whatsoever into any choices. It's very clear. But again, what I'm saying is for an outside investigation at this point. I think we have something in the law that we need to follow the appropriate procedure.
Kristen, I have a question, which is, in your view, does the City of Rye Board of Ethics have jurisdiction to consider an opinion on events or actions that have happened in the past, that have taken place?
Yes, there's nothing, I've looked at Chapter 15 quite a bit lately, and I don't read anything in this chapter that prohibits the Board of Ethics from considering actions that have taken place, are currently taking place, or may take place in the future. There's no limit on the timing of the conduct. So.
Well, thank you all, and also thank you over the last week for sharing your opinions individually with me. I thought those were very productive conversations. And also for giving me the opportunity to acquaint myself, let alone reacquaint myself, with the Code of Ethics. It's apparent that our charter actually had morality in mind. It's replete throughout the Ethics Code, and I'll give one quotation, that public officers and employees observe in their official acts the highest standards of morality and discharge faithfully the duties of their office, regardless of personal consideration. So that's in the opening paragraph as a declaration of policy that, in fact, they consider to be morality to be the issue. I have also thought a great deal about, tried to divine, and it's actually quite explicit as to what they considered to be immoral acts. And as relates to the obligations to citizens by the City Council. And let me just step aside. It's self-evident within the drafting of this chapter that the Board of Ethics exists to look at us, and therefore it doesn't appear that we have any influence on them other than our own statements. As I think Justice Jackson said once, yes, even the Supreme Court reads the newspapers, so no doubt they will hear what has to be said here, but there's no mechanism for us to influence the Board of Ethics. There's implied within this that they can hire an attorney. Of course, we have the ultimate purse strings in them with the City Council, but they exist independently of us. For whatever reason, over more than a decade, this City Council has considered it to be the practice to appoint ex-council people to the Board of Ethics. I don't know why, but Dawn was very helpful in researching this matter for me and for us. And over the last decade, for example, it appears as if there was only one or perhaps two members of the Board of Ethics who weren't ex-council people, and their tenure was brief, filling in for someone else. And it has been the norm, 95% of the time, that this council and this city choose them. So this is the Board of Ethics we have. And someday perhaps we'll find out why, but it's the Board of Ethics we have.
Peter, sorry.
Yeah.
Did you see how often the Ethics Board was convened?
No, I just asked about appointments over the last decade, and evidently the practice, there were 2 ex-mayors, maybe 3 ex-mayors. It's majority, yeah. I also think, try to understand what moral questions the Charter wants to us to look at, or the Board of Ethics. And under obligations to citizens, that is, I guess, 1510. It says, "No officer or employee of the city shall use or attempt to use his official position to secure unwanted privileges or exemptions for himself or others, to grant any special consideration, treatment, or advantage to any citizens beyond that which is available to every other citizen." All of us as council people operate under that moral injunction that we shall not use or attempt to use our official position to secure unwanted privileges or exemptions. So it seems to me that is the question as it's defined by the charter. So I've written this letter to the Board of Ethics. As an officer of the City of Rye, I request that the Board of Ethics review these specific questions. 1, did Mayor French seek or receive preferential treatment by city employees in the granting of star exemptions for his properties at 13 Richard Place and 46 Meadow Place? Did Mayor French, number 2, did Mayor French seek or receive preferential treatment by city employees in the manner the city and its building department handled a complaint regarding a potential violation of the building code at 13 Richard Place? Signed, myself, January 25th. If you would pass this to whom? Kristen or Scott?
This is to forward to the Board of Ethics?
Yes. I got 2 of them.
I think
Well,
one's-
Peter, why don't you send it to them directly? I mean, these 2 individuals have recused themselves.
Well, I trust them actually to deliver my letter.
We're
I
talking
just
about
read-
the appearance of conflict.
Well, you know what, Joe? There are limits. I've just read the letter. I have another copy. I'll tell you
Well,
what.
you could have distributed the letter to us since you took the time to talk to all of us beforehand. I mean, you know, I also read Article 6, Peter.
Silly. Okay. All right.
No, it's not silly, Peter.
Okay.
There's a reason why we're doing this. If you think it's silly, you shouldn't be sending the letter.
No. I meant silliness and belief that Kristen Wilson or Scott Pickup would not deliver the letter to the Board of Ethics. So I'll have another copy. Dawn, if you would deliver this to the Board of Ethics. Thank you.
I take my responsibility on the council seriously, Peter, and I look at another part of the charter,
Okay.
Article 6,
Yeah.
and this is directed to members of the council. You're a member of the council.
Right.
We all are.
Right.
It shall be the duty of the council to require that all city officers faithfully perform their duties, maintain peace and good order within the city, and cause the laws, local laws, and ordinances to be enforced within the city. So, we have an obligation here, okay? And believe me, I wish we didn't have to be talking about this, but as I said, it's a distraction. It's continued to be a distraction, and it will in perpetuity be a distraction unless we address it in the right way. Okay, and that means not giving short shrift to appearances of conflict, as Councilwoman Brett had addressed at the top of the hour. So, this is not,
Well,
we're not going through the motions here. We're doing this because we really want this to be looked at, and we really want answers, and we want to dispose of this.
Well, Joe, I can just say one thing, quite sincerely. Since Laura Brett called me on last Wednesday morning, I don't think I've devoted any more time to any issue regarding this city than this. I've had dozens of phone calls, reread this charter, considered what the implications are, considered about the character of who was on the Board of Ethics, considered about Beth Matthews as chairwoman, whether or not she might be somehow or other railroaded by Ted Dunn and John Alfano, and I dismissed the notion, considered whether or not we should question their integrity or not, and so on and so forth. So this is taking a great deal of my time, my interest. Every line that I wrote in those letters, every word was written by me, and not one word or sentence has been changed by anyone other than my own redrafting as I listened to you all over the last week as to what it was I thought was important and what we should do. Every officer of the City of Rye has the opportunity, just as I did, to write a letter to the Board of Ethics and raise an issue. So if you think I have not put the issue properly, there's no sole jurisdiction here, obviously. I mean, the mayor asked me, but any of us can do this, or any employee of the city of Rye. For me, the moral question, the ultimate question, is whether or not an officer of the city sought or received preferential treatment. And it's my hope that the Board of Ethics can review this. If they don't, then we'll approach this and no doubt in some other fashion together as a council.
Yeah, some-
I think your question is a good question, and I thank you for really delving in. And as I told you on the phone, I agree with the idea of, referring it to an ethics board for the city of Rye. My problem is that because, to quote Joe, there was a technical punt, shall we say, initially, and now that I have this term, apparent conflict of interest, I think I worry about the public's trust. And I believe that we have 3 very good people. I would like to just see that ethics board expanded so that really, if Doug and Scott and Kristen and Noreen and anybody else who is,
Right.
if
Sure, this is quite
right.
broad. It covers
So-
all the employees of the city of Rye.
Right, so if somebody, I would like the public then to trust the decision of the ethics board and feel that that's a sound decision. I think going forward with a larger ethics board, we will, get to a conclusion that the public is comfortable with, given the size of the ethics board right now, and I really question whether we can get beyond the appearance of a conflict of interest.
Well, we'll see. If it's in a subsequent meeting, well, I don't know if I should be continuing chairing this discussion. You want to tell me? Yes? Or do it, the gavel, go back to the mayor?
When this issue is done, I think
Okay,
it
all right.
it goes
Okay.
back to the
Yes,
mayor. for the
yes,
meeting.
ma'am. Yeah.
I think public trust is why we have laws. And the public put their trust in the laws, and we have a law in the charter, and so that's why we're here to follow it. And I applaud Peter for going back and executing this in the appropriate manner, drilling down, clearly defining the question so that we can resolve this issue and put it behind us. And I recommend that we all get behind Peter and move along in the agenda, please.
Any other comments?
Yeah. I understand that, we have this concern and we want to put it behind us. And the fact that we were given this thing back because it wasn't official and more importantly, there was no clear allegation of what was done. So we've kind of codified that now. We're giving it to them and say, here, you judge this. You're the ethics committee. This is your job. This is what you do. I don't think the people in Rye think that we're up here conniving and cheating, and neither are those people, that there's some sort of conspiracy out there. I think that's all ridiculous, absolutely out of this world. That's for fictional novels. That's not the way Rye is. There are a lot of bright people in Rye that would have figured out this far more earlier than anybody else, than we would have. So I think we should give it to the ethics board. They can decide on what to do with it. And you know what? When they come back with their decision, whether we like it or not, that's their decision. And I think we should live with it and move on. So we can get to more important things like what we were requested when we ran for election, which was traffic and pedestrian safety and minimizing those tax increases. So that's my last piece.
Thank you.
And flood mitigation.
And flood mitigation.
There's some comments from the public? Yes. Questions?
First of all, I'd like to thank everyone for even bringing this topic up and discussing it at such length. although I do think it needs to be discussed at much more length. But I have a couple of comments that I'd like to make, just based on what we discussed here today. And I think that I have a lot of input in this, seeing as I am the complainant. First off, I'm in the process of drawing up another complaint. I'd like to make an amendment to my original one, and I'd like to spell it out, and I think that that is important. I think that's been reiterated here on a number of different occasions. And I'm just going to run down my notes. My first note is that Scott and Christian Wilson did recuse themselves, but yet Scott Pickup showed up at the meeting and attended the meeting after he recused himself. And I don't want to beat a dead horse to death, but Joe mentioned it, I believe Joe mentioned it, that Mr. Rubino from Harris Beach represented the city in an issue that Mrs. Wilson recused herself from. My main question is, if we want to get somebody that's independent, I just want to remind everybody about the Schubert hydrologist independent investigation, where the city hired an independent hydrologist that had no connections to Rye whatsoever. And then we found out, after we hired this hydrologist, that he did work, I think it was on Beaver Swamp, or he did some hydrology work for the city. He had a connection to the city attorney. I don't think that this should be a repeated act, because I think that the Schubert issue is still hanging over our heads, because we never really dealt with that. So my suggestion would be, let's not get anybody from Rye. Let's get somebody from Bedford, or let's get somebody from Valhalla, or let's fly somebody in from California. Let's get somebody that doesn't know anybody. If we want an independent investigation, why do we need somebody from Rye? Why leave the question? Why not just say, let's get somebody that doesn't know anybody, and really mean it? I think that the Ethics Committee did fumble the ball, and I think that they dropped the ball on the punt. And I don't think that we should give it back to the Ethics Committee. And understand, any of my letters to the city or to the public or to the press, I don't doubt the standing of anybody on the Ethics Committee. I'm not taking anything away from them. I also respect each and every one of those members. I just find it hard to believe that any one of my friends could make an unbiased judgment against me. And I think that that's the case, especially if my friends tried to vote me into a political position or donated money to my campaign. I think there's a connection. I find it offensive that you call this a fishing expedition. It's not a fishing expedition. I brought some real issues here. We have a mayor who I'm contending didn't pay his fair amount of taxes for 10 years. We have a mayor who I'm contending renovated a complete house. Forget about if it was a one-family house or a two-family house when he bought it. I also think there's issues that he signed mortgage documents inappropriately. I don't know if that's the case or not, but I think these things should be looked into. When this meeting started today, we spoke about this YouTube issue on Rye TV. It circles around the mayor. I believe that the mayor instructed Rye TV to take my comments down from a Rye TV website. I think that's another issue that should be looked into. That's what the whole thing was circling around with YouTube at the beginning of the meeting. I think this whole thing from the beginning wasn't handled right. And I think that there's issue after issue after issue in Rye that's not handled right. And if these issues were handled right from the beginning, we wouldn't be here. I wouldn't be here looking at every piece of paper that this guy's got to see what he did wrong. If he enforced the laws that he should have enforced on Hen Island, we wouldn't be here. That doesn't mean that he didn't do what he did. And it doesn't, I'm not saying that he shouldn't be responsible for what he did. I'm just saying that this whole thing is getting crazy because we haven't looked at any of it. We didn't look at the Schubert matter, we didn't look at the Hen Island matter, we didn't address the Amico matter correctly, and on and on and on. And this is what's happening. I don't know if you realize it, but I used to look at Rye as one of the best communities in Westchester County. I now can't believe what's going on in this city. It's terrible. Some people blame me. All I'm doing is bringing it to their attention. I'm bringing it to the attention of the public. And I think we should look at it. I think we should stop it. And I think it should be independent. Thank you.
Thank you. Would anyone else like to speak on this matter?
Jim Amico, 350 Midland. I'd like to make a few comments. First, I want to touch base on what Catherine said. I want to echo her suggestion. I think you do need to expand it. I don't know if you need permanent expansion as far as membership, but at least have backup, standby members. If 4 people to recuse themselves, is one person allowed to make a decision on their own? How do you replace 4 people instead of just 2 people? I think you have to be prepared for that. As far as Joe's comment, I do believe we're just punting it back to them. You're bouncing from wall to wall. I happen to agree with him. Susanna, I have to agree with Ray. I don't know how you can call this a fishing expedition. I attended this ethics committee meeting for 2 reasons. Number 1, for educational purposes. And number 2, I wanted to learn if the man I represented, supported full-heartedly, 100% with my belief, was guilty of this. Because if he is, I'm ashamed. And if he's not, I want to be proud that he's not. I wanted to know the truth. So I don't find it a fishing expedition. I don't think, whether it be Doug or, Tom, Dick, or Harry as mayor, I don't think anybody has the right to get away with that. But it may be unintentional. We deserve to know whether, and he deserves to know, and he deserves to let the public know whether it's unintentional. And obviously, he's saying that it is, so we all need to know this. And you're right, we need to put this to rest. But I don't think calling it a fishing expedition is proper, and I think you're 100% incorrect in that. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Anyone else? Okay, well, thank you. Good luck.
Back to city business, Peter. Thank you. Council, thank you.